Every dispute holds two different sides. Every objective lens demands honesty. Knowing your fundamental rights, securing absolute justice.
In the afternoon, nice car. Where'd you get it?
Afternoon, officer, it's mine. Just filling up.
Yours, huh? Don't see many people like you driving $500,000 Rolls. Did you borrow it or steal it?
No, sir, I paid for it and it's registered in my name.
Must be some kind of hustle to afford this.
It's called a salary. I'm a judge with the Superior Court.
The officer said the vehicle didn't fit the area. He said the driver looked nervous. What he didn't know, what he couldn't imagine, was that the man he stopped had sentenced more officers than anyone else in that county. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Daniel Reeve had been on the evening shift for just over 6 years, long enough to believe he could read a scene in seconds. The neighbourhood around the gas station was quiet, working class, familiar to him. Same cracked pavement, same flickering canopy lights, same mix of sedans and pickup trucks pulling in for fuel after long shifts. So when a pearl black luxury SUV rolled to pump number 4, its polished rims catching the light, Reeves' attention snapped into focus. From inside his patrol car, engine idling, he watched the driver step out. Black male, mid-40s, suit jacket folded neatly over one arm. Calm movements, no rush, no visible concern about being watched. That detail stuck with Reeve. In his experience, confidence like that usually belonged to people who thought the rules didn't apply to them, or people who didn't belong where they were. He keyed his radio with one hand while keeping his eyes on the man at the pump. "I've got a vehicle here that stands out," he said, voice casual, rehearsed. The words came easily. He had used them before. The man replaced the nozzle, clicked the cap shut, and turned slightly, noticing the patrol car for the first time. Their eyes met for half a second. The man didn't flinch, he didn't look away. He simply nodded once, the way professionals acknowledge each other without submission or challenge. Reeve took that nod the wrong way. He stepped out of the cruiser, adjusting his vest as he walked. "Evening," he called out, hand resting near his belt. "Mind telling me what brings you through this area tonight?" Up close, the driver looked older than Reeve first thought. 48, maybe 50. Trim beard, flecked with grey. His shirt was pressed, shoes clean but practical. He answered without hesitation. "Just filling up. Headed home." The voice was steady, educated, not defensive. That too irritated Reeve in a way he couldn't have explained at the time. "I'm going to need to see some ID," Reeve said, eyes drifting briefly to the SUV badge, then back to the man's face. "This vehicle's registered to you?" "It is," the man replied. He reached slowly into his jacket, pausing just long enough to look at Reeve. "Any reason for the stop, officer?" Reeve didn't answer immediately. He had already decided there was a reason, there always was. He watched the man hand over a leather wallet, the kind that had been used for years, edges worn smooth. Inside was a state-issued driver's license bearing the name Marcus Caldwell. Reeve glanced at the photo, then back at the man. Same calm eyes, same expression. He felt a flicker of uncertainty, but pushed it down. "Sit tight," he said, turning towards the cruiser. "This'll just take a minute." Marcus Caldwell leaned against his SUV, hands visible, gaze following the officer's back. To anyone watching, it looked like compliance. What Reeve didn't see was the calculation happening behind Caldwell's eyes, the practiced awareness of a man who had spent decades watching authority figures misjudge situations and then scramble to recover. Inside the cruiser, Reeve ran the name. The computer lagged for a second longer than usual. Then the screen populated, line by line. No warrants, no flags. Then a title line appeared that made Reeve sit up straighter. "Honourable Marcus L. Caldwell, Superior Court Judge." Reeve blinked, convinced he'd misread it. He refreshed the screen. Same result, same title. His jaw tightened. Judges didn't usually pump their own gas in neighbourhoods like this. Judges didn't usually drive alone without an entourage of deference. Something felt off, and rather than reassess, Reeve doubled down. He stepped back out of the cruiser, posture stiff, voice clipped. "Sir," he said, holding the license a little higher than necessary, "can you explain why a judge is driving this vehicle in this part of town?" Caldwell straightened slightly. "Because it's my car," he said. "And this is my city." A silence settled between them, thick enough that even the hum of the gas station seemed to dim. A couple at far pumps slowed their movements. Someone near the convenience store door paused, sensing friction without knowing its source. Reeve felt the ground shifting, but kept his tone firm. "I need you to understand how this looks," he said. "We've had thefts, fraud. Vehicles like this are often—" "Often what?" Caldwell asked quietly. The question hung there, unanswered. Reeve realized too late that he had crossed from suspicion into accusation without evidence to support it. He also didn't realize that every word, every pause, every inflection was being recorded. From the dash cam, from a passerby's phone, and from Caldwell's own memory, sharpened by years on the bench weighing the credibility of men just like him. This stop, meant to last moments, was already becoming something else. If you believe that standing up for what's right can change everything, share this story and let others know that justice can prevail. Reeve didn't like the silence. He filled it the way officers often do, by asserting control. "Step away from the vehicle," he said, just for a moment. Marcus Caldwell didn't argue. He took one slow step back from the SUV, palms open, the motion smooth enough to be non-threatening, but deliberate enough to make a point. "Officer," he said, "I've complied with everything you've asked. I'd like to know what law I'm being detained under." That word, detained, hit Reeve like a challenge. He shifted his weight, boots scraping lightly against the concrete. "This isn't a detention," he said, though his body language said otherwise. "This is an investigation." "Into what?" Caldwell asked. Reeve gestured vaguely at the car, the street, the neighborhood itself. "Ownership, presence, circumstances." Caldwell exhaled through his nose, a small sound, almost a laugh, but not quite. "Those aren't crimes." A man exiting the convenience store slowed as he passed, eyes flicking between the badge and the suit. Reeve noticed and angled his body slightly, blocking Caldwell from the view of the sidewalk, a subtle move he'd learned early in his career. Keep the scene contained. Keep the narrative yours. "I'm going to ask you again," Reeve said. "Why are you here?" Caldwell met his eyes. "Because I live 12 minutes from here, because my tank was empty, and because I don't need permission to exist in a public space." The words were calm, but they carried weight. Reeve felt it then, a loss of footing. He glanced back toward his cruiser, considering whether to call for backup. His radio crackled with the unrelated chatter. He left it untouched. "Turn around," Reeve said suddenly. "Hands behind your back." The bystander near the door stopped completely now. A woman at the far pump lifted her phone, pretending to text. Caldwell didn't turn. "Officer," he said, voice lower now, firmer, "I'm asking you to stop." Reeve's jaw tightened. "This is your last warning." Caldwell turned slowly, not in compliance, but to face him fully. "I am Judge Marcus Caldwell," he said, enunciating each word. "I preside over Superior Court, Division 3. You have appeared in my courtroom before." That stopped Reeve cold. He searched Caldwell's face, memory scrambling to catch up. A courtroom, a bench, a man in a robe who looked down with the same steady eyes. Reeve felt heat rise in his neck, embarrassment curdling into something sharper. "That doesn't change anything," Reeve said, too quickly. "It should," Caldwell replied, "because you know the standard. Reasonable suspicion, articulable facts, not vibes, not assumptions." For a moment it seemed like Reeve might back down. His hand drifted away from his cuffs. He looked around again, aware now of the audience forming at the edges of the scene. Then pride kicked in. "You don't get special treatment," Reeve said. "Badge or no badge." "I'm not asking for special treatment," Caldwell said. "I'm asking for lawful treatment." Reeve reached out, fingers brushing Caldwell's wrist. The contact was brief, unnecessary, but it changed everything. Caldwell stiffened, not pulling away but standing his ground. "Do not touch me," Caldwell said. Reeve heard the warning too late. He closed his grip and turned Caldwell toward the cruiser, pushing him forward just enough to assert dominance. "You're obstructing an investigation." The woman with the phone raised it higher. The man by the door muttered, "Hey, man," under his breath. Caldwell didn't resist, but his voice carried now, clear and loud. "Officer, you are making a mistake. This stop is being recorded. Your department will see this." Reeve forced Caldwell's hands onto the hood. The metal was still warm from the day's heat. "You should have thought about that before getting mouthy," he said. That was the moment, the one later replayed frame by frame, where Reeves' narrative collapsed. Because when dispatch finally chimed in, it wasn't with backup. It was with a question. "Unit 27, the voice crackled. "Can you confirm you have Judge Marcus Caldwell detained at Pump 4? Reeve froze, his hand hovered mid-air. Caldwell closed his eyes briefly, not in relief, but in resignation. "Yes," Reeve said after a beat. "That's correct." There was a pause on the line, too long. "Copy," dispatch said carefully. "Supervisor en route." The word supervisor landed heavy. Reeve released Caldwell's wrist, but didn't apologize. Caldwell turned, adjusting his jacket, dignity intact despite the smear of dust on his sleeve. "I will not interfere," Caldwell said evenly. "But understand this. I remember everything that happens in my courtroom, and I remember everything that happens outside of it too." The supervisor arrived minutes later, face tight as he took in the scene, the witnesses, the recording phones. He listened. He asked questions. He asked Reeve to step aside. Caldwell was allowed to leave. No charges, no citation, just a quiet nod from the supervisor and a promise that this will be reviewed. Reeve watched the SUV pull away, taillights disappearing into traffic. He told himself it was over. It wasn't. If you believe that accountability matters no matter who holds the power, share this story and remind others that justice begins with truth. The review didn't begin with outrage. It began quietly, the way institutions prefer. A report number, a timestamp, a note in a supervisor's inbox marked "Use of authority questionable." Officer Reeve was told to submit a supplemental statement before the end of his next shift. He sat in the locker room long after midnight, uniform unbuttoned, typing and deleting the same sentence over and over again. He wrote that the vehicle drew his attention. He wrote that the driver's behavior seemed evasive. He didn't write that nothing illegal had occurred. He didn't write that he'd ignored his own training. And he definitely didn't write that he'd panicked when he realized who Marcus Caldwell was. Across town, Caldwell sat at his kitchen table, jacket folded beside him, replaying the stop in his head the way judges replay testimony before issuing rulings. He didn't raise his voice at the gas station. He didn't argue for dominance. He knew better. Escalation was exactly what men like Reeve expected. What unsettled him was how familiar it all felt. By morning, the video was already circulating. It wasn't dramatic footage, no shouting, no takedown, just a calm black man being questioned longer than necessary, touched without cause, ordered to comply without explanation. The kind of clip that didn't go viral for spectacle, but for clarity. Court clerks whispered about it before docket call. A public defender recognized Reeve immediately. So did a prosecutor who had once watched Caldwell suppress evidence because an officer's stop didn't meet the standard. The pattern snapped into focus for people who'd seen it before. Caldwell didn't speak publicly that week. He didn't need to. His silence was doing its own work. The department placed Reeve on administrative duty pending review. He told his partner it was procedural, temporary. "They always side with us," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He avoided eye contact when Internal Affairs requested his phone. They didn't ask for it casually. Investigators found complaints Reeve had dismissed as routine. Stops that went nowhere, searches justified by vague language, names that shared a common thread. None of it had been enough to act on before. Together, it told a story. Caldwell met with attorneys only after being advised firmly that this was no longer just about him. The city wanted it to go away quietly, an apology, a private settlement, no admission of wrongdoing. He declined. "This isn't about embarrassment," he told them, "it's about habit." The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. It named the city, the department, and Reeve individually. It cited constitutional violations with surgical precision, pages of precedent, language Caldwell himself had once quoted from the bench. When reporters asked Reeve for comment, he said he feared for his safety that night. The statement didn't age well. Depositions followed, hours of recorded testimony. Reeve struggled under cross-examination, his words circling back on themselves. He couldn't clearly articulate the suspicion, couldn't explain why Caldwell's answers weren't sufficient, couldn't reconcile why he escalated after learning Caldwell's identity. "Because he challenged me," Reeve finally said. The room went quiet. The city settled before trial. $13.8 million. Mandatory policy changes. Training revisions. Reeve resigned before termination paperwork was finalised. Caldwell returned to the bench months later. Robe on. Expression unchanged. Another case. Another officer. Another decision weighed carefully, deliberately, without bitterness. But the gas station stop followed everyone involved like a shadow. Proof that justice doesn't begin with a gavel. It begins with restraint. If you believe that truth still matters when power is questioned, share this story and help keep accountability alive. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came in layers, measured and undeniable, the way the justice system prefers when it's finally forced to look at itself. Officer Daniel Reeve was no longer in uniform the day the consent decree was announced. He watched the press conference from his apartment, blinds half closed, volume low. The police chief spoke about public trust. The mayor spoke about reform. No one mentioned Reeve by name, but every sentence pointed straight at him. The department's internal ruling had already been finalised. Reeve was found to have violated stop and detention protocol, escalation standards, and departmental bias policy. The language was clinical, but the meaning was simple. He'd acted on assumption, not law. His resignation, submitted voluntarily, was entered into record alongside a notation that barred him from rehire. That detail mattered. Other departments would see it. The city council vote followed days later. The settlement amount, $13.8 million, was read into the chamber like a weather report. No applause, no gasps, just numbers followed by line items, mandatory body camera activation audits, revised stop justification reporting, independent review panels with subpoena power. Someone asked where the money would come from. Taxpayers, the council chair said, and our liability fund. Outside, a small crowd stood in silence. No chants, no signs. Just people who understood what it meant when accountability finally showed up, with paperwork instead of promises. Marcus Caldwell did not attend the vote. He was in chambers that morning, robe hanging behind him, reviewing motions. When a clerk asked how he felt, he paused, pen resting against the page. "I feel," he said carefully, "like the system worked slower than it should, but faster than it used to." Reeve tried to move on. He applied for private security jobs, consulting roles, anything that framed his experience as an asset rather than a warning sign. Interviews went well until background checks came back. Conversations ended politely. Emails stopped arriving. At one interview, the manager slid the file back across the table. "We're looking for judgment," he said, "not just experience." That word followed Reeve everywhere. Months later, he attended a mandatory civil rights course, one of the reforms tied directly to the settlement because former officers seeking certification elsewhere were now required to complete it. He sat in the back, arms crossed, listening as an instructor played the gas station footage frame by frame. "This," the instructor said, pausing on Reeve's hand gripping Caldwell's wrist, "is where authority becomes liability." No one turned around. They didn't need to. The city released its annual report that winter. Complaints were down, stop data showed measurable change. Officers were articulating reasons more clearly or choosing not to stop people at all. The department didn't call it cultural shift, they called it compliance. But on the street, people noticed the difference. Caldwell noticed it too. One afternoon, long after the headlines faded, he stopped at a different gas station on the other side of town. Same routine, same calm. A patrol car passed slowly, then kept going. No lights, no hesitation. Caldwell watched it disappear and allowed himself a small breath. Reeve, meanwhile, sold his cruiser memorabilia online, badges he was allowed to keep, commendation plaques that no longer meant what they once did. He told a friend the lawsuit had ruined his life. The friend didn't argue, but didn't agree either. Because the truth sat plainly in the public record now, unmovable. The stop had been unnecessary, the escalation unjustified, the consequences earned. Years from now, recruits would study the case in training rooms, not as scandal, as instruction, a reminder that power without discipline collapses under its own weight and takes careers with it. Marcus Caldwell still presided over cases involving officers. When they testified, he listened carefully, as he always had. He didn't punish bias, He evaluated evidence. That was the difference between authority exercised and authority abused. The gas station no longer flickered at night. The canopy lights had been replaced. Pump 4 worked fine. To anyone passing through, it was just another place to stop and refuel. But for the city, it became a quiet landmark. Not of outrage, but of reckoning. If you believe that real justice means consequences, not excuses, share this story and remind others that accountability is what protects us all.
Transparency is an ongoing commitment, and education provides your greatest safeguard. Thank you for watching and empowering a truthful world.